We just got done with 75 episodes in a row. I'm really proud of that accomplishment. It's taken us a little over a year and a half, and I'm going to let Chris take it away. What's up, Chris?
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, man.
74 weeks later, back in the seat. So it's been cool to see this podcast start from, hey, I want to start a podcast. How do we do that? To now you're cranking consistently every week. You have guests from all different walks of life, all different industries. And it's doing well. It's getting some buzz. So it's cool to see that trajectory. So to your point, we're here to not talk about me or anything. So we're going to flip that script. You tend to ask a lot of your guests on the show their origin stories, their why, if you will. So, Benny Fisher, what's your why? Where does it all begin, and how does it get to where you are now?
I feel like the why is constantly change, not constantly changing, but I think over every evolution of myself, or every time I've had a new either plateau or a turning point or a fork stuck in the road, if you will, I feel like the why always changes as I kind of gain more perspective and knowledge. So right now, my why, I would say, is to make the biggest impact on people, humanity, to let people know that they are good enough, that they're loved, that they can pretty much do anything that they really want to do if they really feel like they're led to do that. And the problem is, I think a lot of us sometimes don't really know because it's kind of distorted based on our past. And we've been told a lot of things, both good and bad. Sometimes, in this day and age, maybe we overinflate, oh yeah, you're good at this, you're good at that. Before, a lot of times, it's like, oh, you suck at that. Oh, you're not going to be able to do that. And so we have this distortion of what the world tells us. And I'm kind of have a mission to kind of just make sure people understand who they are at their core. Because I think when you can get clarity on who you are as a person without any of the noise of your past or the people around you in your environment, and you can kind of get still, which is hard for a lot of us to do, especially in this society, I think that you can get clarity. You can kind of go back into that past, get more perspective, and kind of look at those things that happened to you, whether they were good or bad, and look at them as like they were happening for you instead of to you. And kind of look at it with a different lens and saying, what was the good in that? How am I going to turn this situation into even a better situation if it was good, or if it was a bad situation, what's the learning lesson? What's the opportunity there? And then I think that you can live a better present day life, in the present, because you're not worried about your past all the time, and it's not haunting you, or you're not confused by it. And when you can live in the present more, I think that you can have a better, brighter future. And when you can have a better, brighter future, I think that you can start to visualize it. When you visualize it and you start talking about it and you start thinking about it, you can actually start doing it and start acting like that. And then when you act like that in the current day, you actually can become that future self. And it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. I kind of make it sound simple, but it's definitely there's a lot of soul searching involved. There's a lot of times, at least in my story, there's a lot of heartache involved. There's a lot of pain. I think I'm a big fan of turning that pain into purpose. But it was not always like that. There was times in my life when I realized I was in pain probably, but didn't have a process on figuring out how to utilize that pain for something good, right? To use it for fuel. And so I think that's my biggest mission, is to try to just ignite people, get people excited about the idea that they can change. Transformation is possible. They don't have to keep living like their current self if they don't like it, if they don't feel comfortable in that and they want to become somebody else. It is possible. I'm living proof. And this has nothing to do with business. Business is just a vehicle that I think I found. It was just another catalyst of what I realized, I need to fix myself. Even though I wasn't broken, I thought I was broken. I just didn't know how to operate with my true, my strengths. Because again, you're told one thing, and when you're a child and when you're young and you're impressionable, that kind of sticks with you. And that's really hard to change, I think, for a lot of people, just like any other habits. But it's possible.
So childhood Ben did not have this level of insight and growth, I imagine. So you talked about it. There's an ignition. There's a feeling of something ignited inside, and it's a process. So let's go back to young Ben, who doesn't know where now Ben is actually going to eventually be in a really great place internally and externally. So let's go back in time. Where do we start?
Well, the earliest memories that I have, when I was probably 4 or 5 years old, starting kindergarten, I remember my mom and dad, they were getting divorced. And those are like the first kind of like memories that I have, like of like the whole family separation. Like I remember living in this white house in Canton South. I'm from Canton, Ohio. And I barely remember living there, but I remember being at the house. I remember kind of like what the house looks like vaguely. I remember being in the driveway one time, and I remember being in the car with my mom, and I remember my dad yelling out something. I can't remember if it was good or bad. I just remember like he was upstairs, like yelling out the window. She was yelling back. Probably wasn't good. I don't know. And then I remember leaving, and then I remember moving into another house, duplex, that my mom rented actually from my grandma. My grandma ended up buying a house, so basically, we could live there. And, I had 2 sisters at the time, and, that's the first memories that I have. And then, there was also, going to school. I remember learning the ABCs in kindergarten, that they had A letter day, B letter day. That was cool, trying to figure out how to fit in at school. My mom was always hustling. She was always trying to work. She always worked. My mom got remarried when I was 7, and, my mom we grew up Baptist, and we grew up going to church like every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, Wednesday night. If there's something going on at the church, like we were there. I think it was just another thing to do, right? That probably didn't cost any money. And, and it was kind of like, that's the way my mom grew up. So I think we did that a lot. And so I did have I was getting, the school teachings, and then I was going to church and learning a lot about that. And it felt pretty good. And I was the oldest, between, me and my 2 sisters. And it felt like there was always a lot of pressure, though, on me. I don't know if I put that on myself or or that actually was the truth, because, maybe I was older. And again, now that I have, a baby, and I've had a 9-year-old, like raising 3 kids at close ages, there's 3 of us within 3 or 4 years. And I can only imagine that had to be, hard to do, right? As a single mom. And, but I remember going to summer camp, at the church camp. I remember thinking that like God and this beautiful like image of like, like all the Sunday school stories that you hear about Jesus, and like, I just remember thinking like that was very magical, and that was very like perfect, and like, so it's cool. Like that's like, man, that's like reality. Like that's like cool. And then as life would go on, I would always remember, man, that's like so not the way I think.
Painted too perfectly.
Well, it's not even that. I think that the stories are told, but then I think my imagination then took it up a notch in my own head of like what this like vision of like heaven would be like, what like, how people should act towards each other and be kind and loving and understanding. And as you kind of go through life, I remember being in like 3rd or 4th grade or 2nd grade. I can't even remember when. And I remember them wanting to do a lot of tests on me. I struggled in school, especially like in 1st grade. They like I was in like a reading, like for like I don't know for slow kids or for kids that like didn't really comprehend reading that well. So I had to do like extra reading, which is fascinating to me when I look back now, because like I don't know, pretty intelligent, and don't have any reading problems. So I think I look back and there's like I had a focus problem, right? I had a way that they weren't able to teach me. Maybe the teachers didn't have the skills, I don't think, back in those days to deal with someone. I was diagnosed with ADHD probably in like 1988, when I was like 7 or 8. So 88, 89. Reading some of the books I read now, that's like kind of when the wave was like, that's when they first like, diagnosed it out, as part of the, clinical things and in all the doctor books. And so I think that, I remember going to my aunt coming over, who was my Aunt Suze, who was a school teacher. And she would actually come over and like give me extra testing. Cause like she was fascinated with like, hey, why are they doing this? He's a good kid. Like he just needs to like, learn a different way. And so I struggled with that. Right. Cause then I was always like, felt like I wasn't good enough, like in school. And then like, and then kids can be cruel, and I was really, trying to get a lot of their approval a lot of the times, I feel like, because at home, maybe I didn't get enough attention, right? 2 sisters, a mom, everyone's struggling a little bit, it's just, I didn't feel like I got a lot of attention. So I think that I was trying to get the approval of like either my parents or the school teacher or kids at school. And, I would, I think, I talked a lot, I tried to like express my ideas and my things and some of the things I was feeling inside. And I probably didn't come out all the way. I was very high energy. I'm still high energy, but it was energy that didn't know how to be, I guess, harnessed. Cause you're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 15 years old, right? Like I don't think you have that ability to be able to harness it. So there's a lot of energy in this little machine running around with not a lot of people that got me. I don't feel like I was understood at all. And that was hard, just kind of going through like school and like high school. And, I remember in 6th grade, I got like 15 detentions, but none of them were for like smoking or doing anything bad. It was all for, hey, you're talking too much. Like, if me and you are in class right now, and the teacher's up front, I'm like, well, I got bored with whatever they were saying. I already grasped a concept and I got bored because I always did well on my test. I always got A's on my tests and got like F's on homework or like, so like I balanced out and usually got a B for the grade, maybe a C. Sometimes I'd get an A if it was an easy class that you didn't really have to do a lot of work in. But as soon as I was bored, I'd be bugging you and be like, hey, Chris, like, what are you doing this? Like, what's up with that? We'd have pencils. We'd be selling pencils back and like whatever, anything else but what was happening up there. So I was distracting you and you might not have been able to like understand it as much. So now I'm distracting you. So now I'm getting in trouble from the teacher. The kids love me one minute. They hate me the next. There was just a lot of like trying to figure things out kind of growing up in school. So
it sounds like there's a common thread through all of that, from where it started through where you left off, of with your first memory feeling like when you can recall coming online as a human, it's right into a very difficult topic of divorce. Mm-hmm. And that what that does for a kid. And then how that maybe that feeling of feeling like you need to always be in a constant state of overcoming kind of leads you through how you were in school even. So it kind of seems like you were overcoming adversity at the very first memory of coming online. So that's an interesting transgression to where you are now and of your actual why. So it seems like that why was born at age 4 or whatever you said it was.
Yeah.
So let's, on the timeline of Ben, let's now move past school into maybe high school, post-high school years.
Yeah.
And knowing that it sounds like that ability to overcome adversity was the constant behind it.
Yeah. And one thing I'll add, like kind of in the middle of that, and so my mom got married to my stepdad, who they're still married like 35 years now, which is crazy. So like I really consider him my dad too. Like I have like 2 dads, and I saw my real dad every week, every Saturday. He always paid his child support. We always came and picked us up. No problems there, right? Just a little bit, lot different personalities, a lot different homes and stuff like that. But there's no like crazy stories where like, my dad didn't show up but I think I was blessed. I had 2 dads with 2 different types of personalities. So I got to really learn from 3 people, including my mom, and my grandma and grandpas. But back to, my mom and dad had a baby, so I had a little half brother, David. And so I was like 11 and a half when he was born. Well, we only lived in a 3-bedroom house. So my 2 sisters, they got their own room. And then me at like 11 or 12, now there's this infant little baby boy. And so that was a little bit of like, I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, yeah, that's not like, like, you don't like, that's not, that's a hard adjustment, right? To like, now I don't have my own room, now I have this little baby in the room. I remember sleeping in the basement sometimes, like on a little thin air mattress, just cause like, or a thin mattress, just cause I didn't want to like, have to deal with the baby getting up all the time. And so I was realizing that it's like, but like, I never thought about it then. I just thought, oh, this is just what we do. Right. Like, and I'm like, no, that was like a lot of work, to like, and just to deal with. Right. And, but I also learned a lot of things. I learned what it was like to, it was kind of cool to like, play with a baby and take care of a baby. And there's a lot of good things too out of it. So I was dealing with that, and then again, now there's 4 kids. And so the attention gets really split up. And when there's a baby, I mean, like, I know what that's like right now because I have a baby, and it's like, full attention on the baby, for good reason. But coming out of high school, I got less detentions every year up until all the way until my senior year. So I got like 15 in 6th grade. I got like 10 in 7th grade. By the time I got to my senior year of high school, I only had 1. It was always for the same thing, something stupid, right? It's like mouthing off to a teacher, or talking to a kid, or getting into trouble like that. But like college was a big deal. Like everybody was talking about it. This is 1999. Most of the kids, unless your parent like had some really good job or doing something that was like super educational, or doctor or lawyer, like, most at that time, most parents never even went to college. And so this was the first opportunity for a big generation to be the first person to go to college and graduate. And it was accessible, and it seemed like the cool thing to do. And, but like, my mom and dad never really went to college. I mean, I think my mom went to college for a little bit, but, both my dads never, I don't think, attempted college. And so like, no one could help me with paperwork to like, they didn't know kind of how to do loans or grants or anything like that. And like, it wasn't really that big a deal. It was like, hey, we work hard. We show up on time every day. We get a steady paycheck every Friday. And that was kind of like, that was the goal. And so I always felt a little bit left behind. Even if I did want to do the college thing, like I didn't really have like a lot of access or a lot of like guidance on like what to do or like how to go about it, and like, oh, what major do you want to pick? I don't know, like give me something general, because I don't really know, so I'm scared. And so I watched all my friends, all the sports guys and all the stuff, like they all went to college, and I was like, all right, well, I guess I got to go. So I enrolled at like Kent Stark, which is like a subsidiary of Kent State. It was like the Canton, Ohio branch, which was a pretty good sized branch. But when I went there and I enrolled, I paid for it myself. I was working at a grocery store, the same grocery store that I started at when I was 15 years old. And it was like, I can't remember, $5, $6, $7 a semester or something like that. But I was like, man, this is like a lot of money for me to like, this just sucks. Like I realized this is the same as high school. Like what good is this going to do me? Like how is this going to help me like where I want to get? Like, I don't even know what I want to be when I grow up. And I saw an ad for a car dealership, said you can make $100,000. And one thing I remember growing up was like, and I love my mom and dad, they work hard, they're great people, but it never felt like we had enough like stuff, or like, we're always like, we always had nice things, they bought us nice things when they could, but it was like, we don't like our jobs and we don't make enough money, like we need to make more money, but like nobody ever did anything about it. It kept, my stepdad worked at a steel mill his whole life, and my mom worked at the hospital her whole life in like administration. And they're both really awesome people, and they both do a really good job at their jobs. But it was like, man, like I kept thinking like, well, why don't you change it? Like, why don't you just like, I'm thinking like, this is America. Like, just go do something else that you want to do and have fun at it and love your job. And like, why can't you love your job? I didn't understand that. And it wasn't just my mom and dad. This was most of society that would complain about what they were doing, but they would never actually change what they were doing. And I, as a young kid, couldn't figure that out, thinking like, wow, the world is my oyster. You can do whatever you want. Like, why don't you just do it? And so I applied for that job at car sales because I was like, wow, I can be somebody. I can make $100,000 a year. I said, this is going to be cool. And I remember paying $500 to like go to this sales training that was lasting 2 weeks. And if you made it through there, you got a job. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Well, $500 is way better than keeping pay for school. And so I went to that sales training and made it through. And wouldn't you know it, like 20 kids, like, I say kids, but like there were some old people in there, but like 20 people registered for that sales training, paid the $500. And by the end of it, there was only like 3 of us left, because most people didn't want to practice or role play or do what you had to do to like become good at sales, because sales is awkward for most people, because like they make you do things that you're not quite used to doing, right? It's almost like acting.
So yeah, that's sales training. You could say sales training and a college class are still sit down and you're learning something.
Mm-hmm. But it was something I was interested in because there was a bigger why.
Yeah, so kind of, it seems like that sales training appealed to every single thing about who you are and through what you have overcome and a kind of become a chameleon for it. Being able to have that personality and that you kind of want that attention. A salesperson wants attention.
Yeah, well,
an introvert doesn't want attention. That's why there's no introvert salespeople. So that's an interesting story that literally an ad changed your trajectory.
Yeah, full-blown circle marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You ever think, what if I never saw that? What if I just decided to just grind out?
Yeah, I would have never known that was even possible.
Yeah.
Like I would have always known as car salesmen as like the dirty scoundrels that they are, and like they throw your keys on the roof and like, you know, try to like wheel and deal and like try to like charge you more money. Yeah, like that's what everybody will tell you that a car salesman is, even though everybody's bought a car off a car salesman.
So then what kind of car salesman were you? Because I know that's not you. So.
Yeah, right. Well, I didn't. Again, all I saw was an opportunity to like get into a place, train for a couple of weeks, and then make $100,000 a year. And I'm like, wow, this is more money than I'll ever need the rest of my life. That was the dream back then. In 1999, you make $100,000 a year, man, you were doing things. And I didn't know really. It was more like the unknown frontier, the adventure part of it. It was like, yeah, cool. I could learn a skill and then instantly make money. I don't got to wait 4 years to go get a job and then have to go through like this whole thing of getting promoted, getting raises. Because even out of college back then, you weren't going to make $100,000 a year. I mean, shoot, people don't make $100,000 a year right now, like right out of college in most jobs, right? And so we're talking like 23, 24 years ago. And so I just wanted the opportunity to like learn, you know, something that I actually was interested in for whatever reason. I think I was interested in the dollar sign because at that time in my life, you know what everyone lacked around me was dollars. And that's what they talked about a lot of times. And, you know, whether it was society doing that, you know, kind of programming at one level, or, you know, or when you walk around, you're hearing what your parents say subliminally. You know, everybody's got the want me's, you know what I mean? It's, you know, it's not nearly as bad as it is now. Today is like, you know, a little bit more extenuating. But yeah, so I think that's why I did it. And it was good. Like I took off fast. I did really well. The first month I sold 12 and a half cars, and I made like, I don't know, $5,500 or $6,000. And I had already moved out. I had actually left my parents' house that I grew up in the September, October after I dropped out of college, because my mom told me that if you're not going to be in college, you got to pay rent, like, you know, like $100. I was like, I ain't paying rent. I'm not living here paying and having to listen to the rules. So then I moved in with my dad, which that was a very like, you know, contested thing. You know, my mom was really hurt about that. And, you know, and I think I just did it to like break the rules, right? Like I just wanted to like be free, right? I wanted to be free. And I thought I could get away with a little bit more at my dad's, and you know, and I could a little bit, but then I even got sick of that and I wanted my own apartment. And so that's why I figured out like, hey, I'm in car sales. I can afford my own apartment. And I went and got my own apartment. And I remember coming home or going back to my mom's and showing her the check, you know, like, cause I was definitely not mature at all. I was very, hey, look, see what I did, you know, and then it was always, you know, it was kind of mean. Looking back, it was kind of mean spirited, but I was just so excited to like show somebody that I did something that, you know, an 18-year-old shouldn't be able to do. Mm-hmm. And I did that. And the problem is after I did car sales for like 3 or 4 months and I was getting good at it and I was doing good, I started hanging out in a different environment, right? With other car salesmen that were probably, looking back, you're probably only 30 years old. I thought they were like 50 or 60 because like I was so young. But looking back and doing the reverse math, like I remember, you know, they're just 30-year-old guys, shirt and ties, drinking coffee, like your typical slick back hair, good looking dudes, got money, got the big house, driving the nice cars, got the good looking family. And I was like, wow, like I want to even be more like that. So I started hanging out with these guys. Well, half the guys would go to the bar after. You know, half the guys would, be smoking cigarettes. You know, some of the guys would be doing drugs. You know, some of the guys. Then there were some of the family guys, but again, since I didn't have a family, who'd I gravitate towards? I gravitated towards the people that weren't hanging out with their family because, I wasn't going to be invited to family day. And so I started to, I think, shape the person I wanted to become now through that lens of that's who I looked up to. And I didn't know how to handle the money because then I would go out and spend the money and I would go out and do different things. But then I would get bored at car sales because I just took it for granted. I was like, oh, I don't need to practice it anymore. I don't need to get good in it. Well, there were a couple of months where I didn't do good at all. Well, then the manager's starting to hey, what's going on? And you're sitting in this fishbowl. It's just big glass everywhere. And this is before social media or people that could do their own marketing. You're just waiting for someone to stroll in off the street. I mean, that's 8 hours. You could literally be sitting there waiting for your opportunity. Well, you can't leave a guy that's got ADHD and he's got a lot of energy that wants to go do something, just sit there. Because I get bored. Next thing you know, I'm finding myself trying to I'm not even at the car lot anymore. And then I'm wandering. I'm down in the service station. I'm talking to the guys washing cars. I'm not paying attention to even customers coming in because I lost focus. I just found myself talking to people. And I got fired from every single car sales job I've ever had in my life. And I've had probably 9 of them. And I would go from dealership to dealership to dealership. And sometimes I'd even get rehired by the dealership that fired me, which is fascinating. I've been hired and fired by the same guy 3 times. His name's Cliff Weber. Cliff, if you're watching, I love you, brother. But he was one of those old guys, used car managers, been in the business his whole life. They get emotional. So they fire you, and then they'd get slow on sales, and they remember you had what it took, but they just didn't know how to handle you. And they thought, 6 months has gone by. All right, cool, come back and try again. And that was the management style. And, that didn't serve me. And, and then my parents would always be yeah, just go get a real job. And that would be, that was tough to hear, but it was probably because then I started believing, I'm oh yeah, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe setting your own path and blazing your own trail. This is hard. Right. And, so I think I ended up getting a real job. I think I went and got a job at, GE. And their money division, and it was a credit, they collected debt on credit cards. So you sat in a cubicle, you wore a headset, you had a computer in front of you, and on a roller, a Rolodex, an automated Rolodex, a dialer system, they would pop up the customer file. You'd call and they trained you on how to script on how to collect money. Oh, you're $30 past due on your JCPenney credit card. All right, cool. How can we, it was my job to try to sell them on the idea that they need to make that $30 payment, and then I knew how to take their payment. But there was leaderboards. There was 100 people in this call center. You're competing with them. That was fun. But you couldn't make $100,000 a year doing that. You could make 30 or 40 grand a year doing it. And so I got bored there. And then they eventually had a thing up where they posted that you could, there was a mortgage division and you can get into mortgages. Oh, well, that was the same as car sales to me. Oh, you can make big money selling mortgages. Well, mortgages is a more cooler job than being a car salesman. So I'm oh, this is going to be cool. I'm going to get trained by GE on how to sell mortgages. Well, I didn't really know nothing about it. I think I was 25 years old at the time, 24 years old at the time. And it was a real job, but eventually that whole mortgage loan division got shut down, right before the whole crash and all that, the countrywide thing. And GE is pretty smart company. They got 38 divisions or whatever, and they're not going to let their one little mortgage division destroy their whole company's brand. So they got out early. So one day we were just all out of jobs. And then again, I have to call my mom. I'm yeah, I don't have a job again. Oh, that's because you chased that commission check. I'm chasing something. I'm always chasing something. And at the time, I didn't realize, but I realize it now. I was just chasing. I was trying to prove to the world that I could do it. That's a sustainable life. But I never really got I never had any mentorship or any wise wisdom. You know what I mean? And I think it's because I was probably young and I was a kid. And again, I was probably because of the way I acted, and I was very talkative and sometimes a little rough around the edges. I could only imagine that. I'm looking down now. If I was trying to mentor a 25-year-old like that, and I'm 42, yeah, how much of that can I, deal with for someone else that I don't really love, or he's not my, it's like, what's the purpose?
It does sound like chasing, but also hearing you tell that, it also sounds like you were collecting. It sounds like you were collecting bits and pieces of what you like from each experience, and that goes like a puzzle piece. And each one you're seeing what you hate and what does not connect with you.
Yeah.
And each one is making that step with collecting a puzzle piece, like a trophy, that eventually. So it sounds like you're always in a state of process, whether you know it or not.
Yeah. And again, when I think back, yeah, you don't know it then when you're in it. But it was almost like I was experimenting, but I was letting my own strengths would also then self-sabotage me. And to where like, then I would get, someone would tell me I'm not good enough.
Yeah,
basically.
You needed that next challenge.
Like someone, like my strengths would be good, but I would self-sabotage myself to where then somebody would either fire me, tell me I'm not good enough, tell me I should go back to doing something that they feel safe and controlled with, whether that's a real job or whether that's just a steady paycheck or whether that's, just, hey, can't you just like shut up and do the work and like don't give anybody else any ideas or talk to anybody else, like, and again, that wasn't my personality. Like I could try to do that for like 3 months, and I tried every once in a while, like just, all right, cool, I'm just gonna. But I was like, I was like almost like raging inside, like it was just like coming out. It's like oozing out of me, but it just wasn't oozing out of me in a filtered and harnessed way that people could be accepting of. It took, 20 years of trial and error to start to like, become who I am today. Which is a much more polished version, but it's the same kid. Like I'm the same kid. I just have more skills today. And after that GE job, to kind of bring it full circle through my 20s, was then I started, poker was on the scene. So like through getting fired at some of these car dealerships and through like I went bankrupt once. Just because I had like $3,000 or $4,000 worth of credit card debt, and I was scared, and I was like, I don't know what else to do. I can't pay. Like I don't have a job. Like so file bankruptcy. So I filed bankruptcy. I ended up getting. I played poker a lot. Just with whatever little bit of money I could find. If I didn't do good a job at poker, like I would be the dealer to like make money to then go play poker. Because poker for me was like this ultimate game of like, all right, cool. It's human against human. It's math. There's money involved. There's cards. We all have the same 52 cards. We all have the same. It was like, it just fit my brain well.
It's a game of personality.
It's just like, it was just a perfect game for me. It still is to this day. I've not found a better game for myself. Business is fun, but even when you become like the CEO, like you have to change the way you do business a little bit because you have to be a little bit more patient. You have to be a little bit more understanding of others at a bigger scale. But at poker, I mean, it's me against 8 other people constantly. And then I can just go, choo, 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 and I can keep changing my personality. I can play like a wild man. I could play like, tight, and I could just keep, it's almost like you're like a crazy person. You can like literally have like multiple personalities at the poker table. A connection to it. Well, and you learn that through the sales training that you can actually condition yourself to be someone different if you practice it. So after that, like I got a job at Verizon. This was before the iPhone, so like we were like pushing BlackBerries back then in the day. I remember working at a mall kiosk, which was good for the first couple of months, but like that little box and doing the same thing over and over again. I realized that's my enemy. Like, doing the same thing over and over again. Like once you get good at selling phones to grandma and grandpa that are walking by and then upgrading everybody to a data plan and getting people to like buy a BlackBerry, like, and you were the number one person and like your little thing and every day, it just got boring. So then guess what I would do? I would go talk to the other people at the other department stores and I would go down to the food court. And next thing you know, I wasn't selling anything. Next thing you know, they're wondering what I'm doing. And at that same point, I ended up getting fired from Verizon. And I was like, man, dude, I was like, how many more of these real jobs can I get? Ford, GE, Verizon, like these are big corporations, man. Cause I thought that's what you had to do. And, I went to a party one night and I never did drugs before. So I was afraid of doing drugs, right? I did a little bit of drinking But I never did drugs because I was a hard line, man. I remember the dare people coming into high school, like, don't do drugs. Drugs are bad. All right, cool. I'm afraid of drugs. I was like 26 years old and there's a party and went to a bachelor party. You know, we were drinking. Next thing you know, I was drunk and someone offered me cocaine and I tried it and I was like, wow, that was like the best feeling in the world. I felt for the first time in my life that things were under control. My brain, like, actually, you know, some people think cocaine speeds people up. Well, for me, cocaine like made everything almost like time stood still. And I was like, I felt like, I don't know, I felt good. And then I went and told one of my friends, another friend about this. I was like, oh yeah, I tried cocaine for the first time. I was like, awesome. By the way, kids, don't do that. It's bad. I'm going to get to that point in a second. And then someone's like, oh yeah, can you get me some? And I'm like, yeah. So I called the guy I like hung out with that night. And I was like, hey, you know, we want to kind of do this on our own. Like, is there a way that I can get, oh yeah. He's like this. And I'm like, well, the next thing you know, I realized there was a market for it. Dummy me, I like didn't really understood like what drug dealing was. Like, I mean, I knew people that did it, but like I was just like, yeah, I don't understand it. And then I understood that like when people want something and that you're the person that can get it, and then you got to go find somebody else that has what they want, buy it for lower, sell it to them for a little bit more, and then you can make a little bit of money doing it. And then people like you, people like that's an accepting feeling, right? Kind of like in sales. Like when you find somebody the car of their dreams, the perfect car for them, like it's rewarding. Like when you help somebody, that's what I like about sales. Like it's really just the art of helping people, you know, through a process of helping them buy something. Well, it's no different than drugs. Like, you know, you feel like you're wanted. I'm like, wow, this is cool. Like people actually are telling me that I'm doing a good job for the first time in my life. And so I did that, you know, for a couple of years, and I wasn't really that good at it. You know, there was times when, you know, I couldn't get drugs, you know, from the hookup guy to like sell to the guys at the parties and the nightclubs. One time so because of that, I went downtown Canton and did a deal with a guy that I probably shouldn't have. And eventually, you know, one deal led to another, and I found myself in the back of a car or in the front of a car with two guys and a gun got pulled on my head. And I got robbed at gunpoint because I didn't, you know, I'm not a drug dealer. Like, I don't know how to operate in the hood, right? But like, you know, here I am trying to like, you know, hey man, like I got a deal. I got cash. You got product. Let's do this. I just thought everybody just, you know, transactionally do like a good clean transaction. Like why steal when like I'm paying you and hopefully you're marking it up a little bit. I assume you're making money. Like, but yeah, they pulled out a gun, they robbed me, pistol whipped me over the head, stole my car. At the time, I was actually borrowing a friend's Mustang so I could look cool as a successful drug dealer, even though I had a beat up white used minivan that I got when my other Mustang got repoed through the bankruptcy. Yeah, I was like at a 1991 like Arrow, like a Ford, or no, it was a Dodge. It was a Dodge Caravan, beat up. People, the people that know me now, like they don't know that Ben. Like that Ben is like, I remember it. I just did whatever it took. And that wasn't enough to wake me up. You would think that'd be enough to wake me up. That wasn't enough to wake me up. So I still kept doing it because I was like, I don't have any other choices. Like, what am I going to do? Go get a restaurant job and make like, you know, $15 an hour the rest of my life? Like, you know, I wasn't I wasn't Pablo Escobar, but like, you know, I had, you know, a few $1,000 in cash in my pocket at any time. And, you know, I was paying my rent.
And you didn't have anybody telling you how to do it.
No.
Your hours, how you have to do it. So it was probably,
I was just figuring out on my own.
It was your first taste of entrepreneurialism in a very different way.
In a different world, right? With people that were accepting of it, but they weren't the right kind of people, right? They didn't have the best morals. They didn't have the best backgrounds. You know, and here I am. You know, I have a pretty decent background. You know, I got good parents. You know, I got people that love me. You know, I'm a good kid at heart. And I'm in this world that like, I feel like I can operate in a little bit and get creative. And it's kind of adventuresome, but yeah, I was in way over my head. And, it got to a point too, like to one point where like, I couldn't get product, you know, because again, you have limited options. You know, it's not like you can just go into any store and like, just go buy stuff, right? Like you can buy shingles for a roofing company. You can go to anywhere in the world and buy stuff. Well, I remember one time not being so broke that like I eventually got evicted from my apartment because I couldn't pay my rent. And my rent was like $350 a month. Now, whether I couldn't pay my rent or I spent it on other stuff probably is what happened. If I look back, you know, I was like trying to act like I was successful, partying at the nightclubs, and I got evicted from my apartment. I lived in my van for 3 days. so I was homeless for 3 days. And it was because I was too proud to tell my mom and dad that, like, first of all, I did not tell them I was doing that. I told them I was playing poker for a living, which, who knows what everybody believed. But it was, that was humbling. And then I went and stayed on a buddy's couch for a couple months, then another buddy's couch. And then eventually I got back up on my feet and got an apartment. But that all led to me getting convicted of 2 felonies because someone turned me in for drug trafficking because they wanted to get out of a charge. So then I got raided. Then I had to go through all that. And at the same time, I was, doing a little bit of partying. So like I knew like all the drugs, I had tried heroin. I never shot it, but I snorted it. I did the Xanax thing, when everybody's like, doing Xanny bars and like, knocking, we'd be watching movies and I'd be like, oh, just acting like you watching those movies, right? And that's all I would do is watch those movies and like just participate like the movies, and I kept thinking like, oh, this is my life for the rest of my life. And somehow I told myself that was a compelling future.
Funny how that works, right?
It's wild, man. And then my uncle called. Well, then I got spared of going to prison, luckily, because I didn't have a record, and I did all the right things. I got a job at a call center again. So funny enough, soliciting blood donations for the Central Blood Bank of Pittsburgh, but the call center was in Canton, Ohio. I was making like $9 or $10 an hour, trying to go through this court case, hoping that I could be spared of going to prison because like I don't think I would do well in prison. And luckily, they gave me probation. I had to move in with my sister in the basement. Oh, that was humbling, because she basically told me every day, like she was like over, she was in charge of me. She was like, she had the power, right? And it was nice that she let me move in, but it was also like I had to hear about it every day too.
It sounds like you needed the bottom to fall out.
Oh, the bottom fell out.
For the next challenge to show itself.
Yep.
Right.
And it did. And my uncle called me, who had been roofing his whole life in Pittsburgh, and said, hey, move to Pittsburgh, help me with sales and marketing of my commercial roofing company. I've been doing it for a year on my own. And, I always knew that he was successful. He was always my uncle that I always kind of looked up to because he was the one, kind of always, even when he was working for another guy at a roofing company, he was always traveling the world. Like, he was in St. Croix and he'd put roofs on. And he always was, he was the guy that could always go on these cool vacations with his family. And like, it was just, and he always lived in a different place. And it was always intriguing, like Pittsburgh, it's like, oh, it's only 2 hours from Canton, but like Pittsburgh and Canton are completely different places.
Maybe he was always chasing something. You saw that and you're like, hey, I'm always chasing something.
Yeah, he went on an adventure. He went to college, met a girl, had some babies and like moved to a different city. And I was like, yeah, what would I like? Well, of course, like my life, with a felony drug conviction, there's always these things on applications where you have to check that box. I'm like, how am I going to check that box for the rest of my life? And what job am I ever going to get? I literally thought my life was over. I mean, it was depressing. And, and so when he called, I'm like, sure. And guess what my mom said? What if he can't pay you every Friday? Or like, what if like, oh, don't chase that. Just stay with the real job. And I'm like, oh, Mom, come on. I love you. But like, I got to go. Here I go again. And so, I moved to Pittsburgh and I didn't know one single person. And that's cool part of the story too, because like now, with the success I feel like that our company's having,
everybody.
I mean, I feel like I know a lot of people. I feel like a lot more people know who I am than I can even keep up with, like remembering who everybody else is, just because they see the brand, right? They see the trucks everywhere. They hear about it, right? People that are even afraid to maybe even come up and talk to me, even though I say, please approach me. Like I'm very approachable. I would love to talk to everybody. But it's just fascinating when I hear other people trying to start businesses. They're like, well, like, I'm like, dude, like I didn't know anybody. Like when I moved here 13 years ago. We're recording this right now in the summer of 2023. I moved here in 2010 with nothing. I owed my uncle $1,200. He helped pay the fines off. He wrote a letter to the court. I got released to probation, so I was allowed to cross state lines, right? Yeah, and so I lived in a little $300 apartment in Monongahela at a 2-story home that I had like the second floor of. Like, and it wasn't the nicest place in the world, but who cares? Like, I'm free. I'm free again, right? And what's this roofing stuff? Like, all I knew is I didn't want to be ripping off roofs because like it was really hard because he had me do that a few times over the different summers of the last, 10 years of, when I was a kid, even in high school. All the side jobs were like, oh, Uncle Mark's doing a Macy's or a Kaufman's or whatever they called it back then. And hey, anybody that wants to make $20 an hour can go up on a roof and get dirty and like, feel like almost die, right? From roofing because it's hard. But I was like, I'll take the challenge on, and I learned, I learned a lot about commercial roofing. I learned a lot about business. It was just so interesting coming from, the drug dealing world, from corporate world to the drug dealing world to then the small business world. Like I never seen small business up close and personal. I never even knew what small business was really. And to see my uncle operating like that, it was like really cool. Like it was awesome because he looks like me, talks like me. Not exactly, but like, he's family, right? So there's a lot of similarities and it was just cool, like watching him operate and then learning things. Like, I would go to the Chamber of Commerce, because I had to be the marketing guy. I didn't know anything about marketing. Like, oh, you got to go to networking events, right? So like I would go to the little Monongahela Chamber of Commerce and I would just get to be around other business owners and they didn't know about my past because I was too way, now I talk about it like, it's no big deal. And that takes a long time to get to a place to where you can feel comfortable sharing and being fully exposed. But I will say that through that whole journey over the last couple of years that it's been freeing, right? Because I don't feel like I live in a prison anymore. I was always afraid to tell people about my past because I didn't think they'd accept me. People didn't accept me when I was like trying to be a good person. Why the heck would they accept me when I told them I'm like a 2-time convicted drug felon that happened to move over here? The only reason I'm over here is because I'm a derelict. Like you can't just go lead with that, right? Because that's what I thought I was.
It drops the guard down too because everybody has something. And so when somebody's very confident in showing there's something, it just brings the guard down. Then you can have a more personal relationship with somebody, right?
Yeah. I just didn't know. I was afraid, right? Because I didn't have I didn't have a good enough resume. And I like, and so I was just trying to serve. I was trying to serve my uncle. I was trying to serve the people in Monongahela. I was just trying to be that guy, right? And at the same time, I remember social media was getting popular, like Facebook was like starting to become to the masses, right? Like adults were actually, when I was like 30 at the time, but like, 40-year-olds were on Facebook and like 50-year-olds were starting to experiment on Facebook. It wasn't just for the MySpace and the Facebook of college kids, right? It was coming out to mainstream. And I started to tinker on that. I really liked that. And, what would happen to my uncle's roofing business is like, he didn't have a ton of crews. So like if we would, he was really good at sales. I was pretty good at sales. And I'd have to like stop selling in like September or October because like, the backlog would be so much. It's like, I would get a little bit bored. Well, then if I was bored, there was nothing to do. I'd have to go do roofing stuff. And so like, that wasn't that fun, like, and always having to be the errand boy. I did it because I was responsible. Like I knew how to get up at 4 a.m, go meet somebody for metal at 5 a.m, go take it to a job site in Newcastle and like running over here to New Stanton to do something else. Cause commercial roofing, we were everywhere in Southwestern Pennsylvania. And I was also like the errand boy, which felt good to be like the hero that always could save the day. But then like, after a while, it's like, how many times can I just go from point A to point B? Like it's kind of boring. But I kept listening to Gary Vee on YouTube or Facebook or wherever he was like spitting out some stuff. And I would like be listening to him. I'm like, man, this guy's talking about like some cool stuff, like with marketing and branding and how to get yourself out there and, put the camera on yourself and just start talking about what you're doing. And so I just started trying to embody that a little bit when I worked for my uncle. And, but like there was a lot of cool new things in technology and cutting edge things that were happening in the roofing industry. And there was a lot of apps and CRMs and stuff like that, and he was a little bit more old school. And I was like trying to like, try to impress him with like, hey, look at this technology. Hey, look at this marketing idea. And he's a roofer, right? Like a roofer that turned into a businessman and super successful. And we just, we didn't see eye to eye on that stuff, and again, that kind of hurt my feelings a little bit because I was like, I saw all these like opportunities, right? Well, and I also saw this big need in the residential stuff because we did mostly commercial, but every once in a while we do a lot of residential stuff. And homeowners would tell me about their experience with contractors and about how it was like so terrible. And I come from this like professional world, right? Car sales, phone sales, mortgages. And I'm like, well, why don't you just like, why aren't people just doing it like that? But just installing roofs. Like, why can't you just like, why can't you have the Chick-fil-A or the Disney World of roofing? Like, why is that not a thing? And in Pittsburgh, there was nobody doing roofing like that. It was all kind of just, grandpas and dads, uncles and sons and cousins. And, it was like, your last name, roofing company, a quote, they would handwrite a quote, and, maybe they'd call you back. Maybe they wouldn't because they're busy. They were busy being busy because they didn't know how to scale so that way they could help more people. And so eventually my uncle told me I should go sell roofs for someone else because I think, again, like all my other managers in my life, all my other bosses didn't know how to handle my didn't know how to handle my energy or know how to it eventually just gets, there's too much friction. And told me
it's hard to have a constant need to evolve when you're in a setting that is just, we do things this way.
Yeah.
And there's no arc for change.
Yeah.
So it's not like you continue that search for, I need something that allows me to always be in a constant state of evolving and finding a problem and solving it, finding a problem and solving it.
I still haven't figured out if I was born with that or that was my environment when I was young and I was always trying to figure things out. And that's just how I became. I'm still trying to analyze, I'm
not Freud, but it sounds like that you adapted to that early and it just started growing.
Yeah, and now you can't stop it because now I'm addicted to growth.
Yep.
That's my new addiction, growth.
I like it.
It's a good, healthy addiction, I can tell you that, where you can turn your pain into purpose. And so I had a choice to make, and again, this is my uncle, this is my flesh and blood. I love him to death. He told me a couple of years ago that he's really proud of me. But those first couple of years, it was a little awkward, it was like, because I didn't know what else to do. You know what I mean? And I eventually, by the way, I had gotten married during that time and I had a son, Sammy. And I was like, when I got let go from there, he was one, and I was only probably married for like 2 or 3 years. And I had got my felony expunged though. My wife at the time, we're divorced now, but my wife at the time, she helped me with some paperwork to get it expunged. And so that's cool. So cool. Now I'm running, oh good, I didn't have to tell anybody I had this felony. Well, now I don't even have it. So now it's cool. I don't have to ever tell anybody about it. And so when I had the option, it was like, I emailed a couple people. I'm like, I emailed a couple big roofing companies. I'm like, hey, just so you know, I might be looking for a job. I don't know if, nobody replied back to me. It was probably one of those inter-office emails that nobody responded to. But I really knew that I wanted to just kind of do it on my own and just say man, I know how to do this. I know how to help customers and I know how to get roofing products and I know how to try to get roof crews on how to do things. And I think I can do this. And I'm going to create this cool brand that Gary Vee keeps talking about. Just be yourself, create this brand. And when, first thing you want to do, every business owner wants to put a name on something, right? And I was like, well, people always called me Fish. Some people used to call my dad Big Fish. There's just a lot of plays off that, right? And Big Fish just seemed to see something that that sounded good, right? People call you Big Fish, that just sounds good. And so I'm like, yeah, we're going to call it the Big Fish Contracting Company. And when I ran that by, again, my circle, which was usually my mom every once in a while, and she was living in Ohio, maybe some people, some acquaintances here, they're like, well, you are in Three Rivers and people could think that you're selling fish sandwiches or that you're renting fishing tackle or boat stuff. I'm like, yeah, I can see that, but not when I become the best roofing contractor and then they're just going to know that Big Fish does roofs, not the other way around. So that's the vision that I had. I didn't know how to clearly articulate that back then, but that's what I set out to do. I set out to just serve the homeowners of Pittsburgh as good as I could, better than any other contractor, because I was coming from the approach of customer service mixed with technology to be able to help scale, to be able to help serve more customers, because I know when you treat them good, they're going to tell people and then you're going to need to do more. But for whatever reason, people, other contractors weren't trying to do that, and they didn't care about the home. They want to do the big jobs. Everybody wants to do the $100,000 jobs. Well, why not? If you've been doing the same thing over and over again, you have the chance to do $100,000 jobs over and over again. Why not? So who is going to focus on, the $500 repairs and the $10,000 roofs? Back then they were 10,000. They're not 10,000 anymore. Inflation. But that's what I set out to do. And, that led me on a whole nother journey because I had never really managed things before. I was always just self-reliant on myself. Well, then, that led to a whole nother set of challenges. I was able to do well for myself that first year because it was me and a crew. We did $1.3 million in revenue. I was rich. I felt like I was rich. I never made more than $50,000 or $60,000 before in my life. I made $200,000 or $300,000 in 1 year. I was like, whoa. And then again, old Ben, not this new Ben, I was a little fast and loose with it. It was I was trying to be somebody. I was I joined a country club. I went to the Game 7 of the World Series with the Indians. I went to the LeBron James finals games. I was spending money. We bought new cars for write-offs. You can buy a new car. I was doing a lot of things because I didn't have any of that old man wisdom guidance. And even if it was there, I probably wouldn't have listened to it. because I was just so, like, again, I felt like back when I was 18 and I flashed that check to my mom and said, oh, hey, look, I did it. Like, it's like I had this like need to like show the world that I did it. And I look back at it, I'm like, man, that's so immature. Like, why do I have to do that? Like, that's the part that frustrated me about myself back then. But kind of like to come full circle and kind of speed the story up a little bit, 2 years into my business, things were going good. People were taking notice, right? Like you don't just do I think my second year in business, we did $2.5 million in sales. I mean, that's a lot for a roofing company back then. Like no other roofing company was really kind of even on that level, especially with, a cool character like a Fish. And then they were starting to see a couple trucks. Our 5-star reviews were going good. We were getting accolades from the manufacturer. Life was good. I bought a big new house in Jefferson Hills. Everything on the outside was looking good, right? To anybody watching. Well, inside, I'm struggling to learn how to be a husband, struggling to learn how to be a dad, struggling to be a business owner. I'm still selling all the roofs. Like I'm trying to do all these things. And I'm starting to like lose my mind. I ended up going, and I knew what would make me feel good, and I knew drugs would make me feel good. And I secretly started doing drugs. Nobody knew about it really. And I I remember August 2017, I woke up in the back of an ambulance with a mask on me, paramedic over me, said, what did you take? What did you take? Well, here, it started with Percocet, started with like some pain pills. Then I started buying drugs online and, Oxycontin and, I guess it was laced with fentanyl. Didn't really know about it. You'd hear stories about, doesn't happen to like people like me in the suburbs, like businessmen. Well, here I had, I guess I snorted something that was like, laced with fentanyl. And I dropped over. Luckily, one of my friends was at my house that day. My wife was downstairs. They called 911 and, they were there in 5 minutes. I lived 5 minutes from Jefferson Hospital. I mean, literally, like I could see Jefferson Hospital through the trees. And, 3 days I was in intensive care. Again, my family gets called in from Canton. They come, it's again, Ben, you screwed up again. Like how many times, like, do I have to look at my family's eyes and say like, I screwed up? Because it sucks. It's like the worst feeling, especially when you're trying to do something in your mind that's like really good, but you just lack the skills and you lack the process to like be able to figure out how to do it, to not self-sabotage yourself. And again, I kept it a secret. We told everybody that like, a couple people that like knew I was gone from work for a little bit, diabetic shock or something like, we just, I was afraid to tell people that I'm struggling because like, who wants to work for somebody that's like weak, right? Well, this is what I thought back then. This is what my mind was telling me. Who would want to work for somebody like that? What customer would ever want to do business with a drug addict? You know what I mean? That's what I was thinking. I was like, I don't know where to get help. I don't know where to get help. And if I go into the clinic in Pittsburgh and you also see me like as a businessman over here, and then people start talking about you, it's like that, all those things were going through my mind. I was afraid to ask for help. Yep. And that was a struggle, right? That's the first time I ever felt like what depression feels like. I didn't ever, people would talk about depression and I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Like, this is the coolest world ever. Everything's rosy colored. Well, that's the first time I felt depressed because I was like, what is wrong with me? And I've had all these series of letdowns in my life and I didn't know how to process. Like, I didn't know how to process it. And I didn't know how to keep everybody happy at the same time and do that, right? I got a wife, I got a kid, I got a business, I got a family, I got a reputation, I got a really good reputation, on the, like everything was going good. And I would do these things in secret and in hiding. And I was destroying myself. I was killing myself. I mean, I gained so much weight. Like I left high school at 175 and through all this, like food was my first addiction. I went from like 175 to like 225. I remember breaking up with a girl, then gained like 100 pounds. And then by the time like I did that, like when I OD'd, I was like 370 pounds. Like I was killing myself, and I was burning the candle at both ends, trying to keep it all together. And it just like was not sustainable. I mean, but what's crazy is I'm still here. Like through all those near-death experiences, getting robbed at gunpoint, ODing, escaping prison. Like I'm still here. Like I felt like at that point, I'm like, all right, why am I still alive? and I kept seeing, you know, friends, acquaintances, people I grew up with die. You know, this drug pandemic that we have it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, you probably know people that have passed, and, you know, next thing you know, you get a call, you know, for another 40-year-old dead. Well, 40-year-olds just don't die. You know, 30-year-olds just don't die. And so there's a huge pandemic in this country, or epidemic, I should say, not pandemic. And it's like, it can happen to it's happening to any of us, right? Like, if it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody. And I just learned, and I realized that, like, all right, something's wrong with me, but, like, I'm still here for a purpose. So I got to figure out what that is. So again, I go into the think tank, and the first thing I did was hired a business consultant and said, all right, I got to figure out how to get my business working for me, because I feel like there's a lot of stress here, because this should be working smoother. I didn't become a business owner to, like, work 100 hours a week. And, like, and at that time, the money, I was making less money because I had all these people, and I couldn't figure out, like, why I was making less money. Well, I was inefficient. You know, the people weren't obviously as, you know, one person doing 1.3 million is very efficient versus, like, you know, 5 people doing 2.5 million. The math doesn't add up, right? And then I realized, well, you got to raise your prices a little bit. You have to have an experience that you can tell customers about, repeatable. You know, you got to make it like Chick-fil-A. You know, you got to do the same thing over and over again. And I found that we were just kind of always winging it, doing a good job, but always winging it. But as you started adding more people, it started becoming more complex. And so then I started learning systems in business that actually helped me in my personal life, because then I actually had more time to work on myself. And so it first started with, you know, how to, you know, we call it the big fish experience, you know, how to name that experience that you're, you know, the show that you're putting on for the customer that day of job when they're getting their new roof. How do you do that, right? And how do you write a process for it so you can train someone else how to do it? Well, then how do you go out and sell that over and over and over again? How do you put that material, that experience, and translate that into a sales process? And then how do you teach other humans how to sell your brand and your values and your image? And then you have to learn that. And then once I delegated that, then I'm like, all right. And then COVID happens. And I'm like, wow, like, that sucks. I got really scared. You know, I didn't know. Like, I'm leading, you know, I had like 12 people, and I'm like, oh, crap. Like, I don't know. Governor's trying to tell us we can't work. I'm like, well, we all need to eat. Like, are we, what do they call it back then? Are we, what was the service? What was the term that they need? What was the term?
Yeah, like a vital.
Essential services. Are we essential services? Yeah. Well, then, I mean, everyone's trying to figure out how they're essential. Well, yeah, because if your roof falls in, like, and people start becoming homeless, like, yeah, like, I think you have to we're considered essential. So there's just a lot of challenges, you know, and I ended up getting divorced, you know, in 2020. You know, and again, I was not a good, you know, I didn't know what I didn't know, you know what I mean, about life, and made a lot of mistakes, you know, did a lot of dumb stuff. And, but when COVID came, it was the perfect time for me to sit with my own self and analyze who I was. And then since COVID, I went on this crazy mission of, like, figuring out who Ben was. I read this book called Rocket Fuel, and they talk about visionaries. And I was like, yeah, that's me. And then it made it feel like it was okay not to have all these other skills that I kept trying to be like 3 people at once. And then I realized I can just be me, and I can put people around me that have these other skills, and things can get a little bit more, there can be a little bit more flow. You know, I met my fiance, Brittany, and she was into health and wellness and yoga and meditation. And, you know, I lost 75 pounds just by hanging out with her, and, like, wanting to look cool to her. 'Cause, like, you know, I was not in good shape, and I still have a long way to go. But, you know, the fact that I lost 75 pounds and was able to do that, I was able to start, you know, transforming the way my company looked. You know, I was starting to implement systems and processes and trying to go from salesperson to CEO, because, like, it was hard to keep that all up. And that's one of the toughest transitions for entrepreneurs, from founders to, like, that are go, 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 to then be more CEO, to, like, kind of be a shepherd. Because you can't be that same type of that you have to channel the energy differently, because it's not what you can do. It's how do you channel the energy for the masses, right? And that was a big thing, you know. And there's so many different things that I could talk about, you know. And right after, a year after COVID, my little brother, remember, that's 11 and a half years younger than me, shot and killed in the back of the head. 3 months after, I hired a business partner, Rob, who works here today, Big Fish. And then Mallory came on as my executive assistant. Literally a couple weeks after Mallory came on, my brother died. I went to Ohio, back to Canton. And I'm like, man, that could have been like this again. Like, why am I still here? Like, this is still all this bad stuff is happening. And it's like, why is this happening? And like, and I was thinking from my brother's standpoint, like I was thinking like, wow, what was he into? Like, what was he doing? It's heartbreaking for our family, but I was able to leave my business for 3 weeks because I had systems, and I was actually able to spend time with my family to be able to like mourn, and actually like, be there for them, because I was already learning the year before about like, how my past actually happened for me on purpose. It actually made me who I am today. I am so grateful, like, for every single thing that happened to me, good and bad. I'm so grateful that, my mom taught me how to show up on time and always, care for people and always do the right thing, right? Two core principles that I have here at Big Fish. Those are huge. I'm also happy that she told me that when she told me that I should do this and should do that, and I kind of always fought that. And I always knew that I could do something that was bigger, that could transcend, what I was thinking. How else can you elevate an industry? Like, I feel like I know there's other people in this industry here in Pittsburgh that's done a good job, but I'm telling you that I put the stamp on customer service and roofing in Pittsburgh. I know about it. And I've helped everyone else, even my competitors, chase that. And now we have a cool, there's 10 or 15 really good companies out there that are trying to do the same thing. And I think it's awesome, right? Because I think a rising tide raises all boats. And it's really cool to think that I could be the catalyst, because I dreamed about that when I listened to those homeowner stories, when I worked for my uncle, and I thought, man, we could do it better. Like, we can do it better. And then I went out and did it, and I'm still doing it, right? And now my people are doing it. And now I get to go around and tell my story to other contractors, other entrepreneurs. I love having the podcast, so that way the fans and the non-entrepreneurs can follow it too, because this story of my life is more about how can you turn that pain into purpose? How do you transform your own personal life? Because when you transform your personal life, anything's possible. Business just gets easier. Being a good dad becomes easier. Being a good husband becomes easier. Becoming a better friend becomes easier, because now I'm more present. Before, I was always like ashamed of my past and worried about this like muddy future that I had, and like I couldn't keep it all together. Well, now, because I've dealt with the past through lots of therapy, still going to therapy, having gratitude for it, it clears me up in the present so I can be here. Present is with you as I am speaking with you today. Being fully engraced in this moment. I'm not worried about what meeting's next. I'm not worried about what I did before, because everything's happening in the universe kind of for me. And it's kind of like now that I have a system to operate in, I can be more free. And when I'm like that, now my future is so bright and vivid. It's even more, it's like, it kind of reminds me when I was 7 years old, and I was thinking about, remember we talked about at the beginning of the podcast about like how I had this like perfect vision of the future of like what it looks like, with everybody loving each other and everybody, doing good things. Well, that's clear. Now I can start to kind of try to initiate that change that needs to happen to help other people, because I can't do it by myself. I need everybody to elevate their game a little bit to go through that process to become a better human, because when we have better humans, we can affect better change together.
I think there's a really good story that has come together now from hearing that. Some of that stuff I've known, some of that I haven't. So
you hear bits and pieces of it.
The story I hear that really unfolds here, and why you have this podcast, is you spent from age 4 through, in probably still chasing, right? You're chasing something to keep putting those puzzle pieces in. But you were chasing externally, but realized everything you needed to create that perfect utopia that you imagined, to create a customer service driven world, was just within you the whole time. So you're chasing all these things externally, but everything you needed was right there. It took mass amounts of adversity and pain to make that purpose actually ignite, which is how we started the conversation about it took an ignition, right? So it's cool to hear that full circle. And then how this podcast, now this all makes more sense of when you sit down with somebody, it's this mantra of, don't tell me what's on your business card.
Yeah.
Tell me the beginning and the pain and how you got to that business card. So I think that's a cool trajectory, and I think that's a big reason people are really enjoying your podcast, is because there's so much out there about it's too top level. It's too kind of conceited in the way that they talk about how to help somebody get better.
Well, they're trying to fake it. They're trying to copy what these other guys are doing. I watch, it's like, it's the buzzwords.
Exactly.
And they're not actually going deep. And I've been there. So, and again, now I feel fully confident, and my identity is not tied to my company anymore or my success. And so that was a big shift, right? Because, if Big Fish Contracting was doing good, Ben was feeling good. If it was doing bad, Ben was feeling bad. When Ben's feeling bad, he has a tendency to self-sabotage himself because he doesn't know how, because he's tied to that identity. Well, when I realized that my identity is in myself, and Big Fish Contracting is just another being, and my kid, I can't control what my kid does. If my kid does something good or bad, why am I going to tie that to my identity? If my friend, if you do something good or bad to me and I start to feel differently about myself because of that, now I'm tying all these external things that I was chasing, right? And even objects like cars and houses and watches and vacations and whatever else, and people and companies and everything else. If I tie that to my being, well, when it's good, I'm good. When it's bad, I'm bad. Well, when you have 55 different things circling around you and they're all at different levels, that can really screw a person up. And I think that's what's happening to most of society right now. Actually, I do believe there's disease, and I do believe that there's, some stuff, but I think most of it at the end of the day is just a byproduct of our own upbringing, our own environment, our own, us tying our identity to external things. And then when things are good, they're good. When they're bad, they're bad. And that's why we're always in this this chaos. But once I realized that hey, I just got to love me. When's the last time you sat down by yourself, not necessarily you, but people listening, and just loved yourself?
Not often, probably, because of all those external things you just mentioned prevent you from thinking I should do that, or I could do that. Because you're too distracted. So without a core that's encased in armor and self-awareness, everything else on the outside is always going to seep through and affect you somehow. But if you can shore up that center, things can't touch you, or they bounce off and you move on to the next thing. And I think that's definitely become personified in your podcast, even from all the stories that we've heard from episode 1 through 75. Everybody has that story that's a different version with different little nuances here and there, but where they come out on the other end, there's definitely an archetype of your guest. And I think the people listening are also in that same world. And maybe a good question to ask now is, what's the next evolution of the Big Fish Cares podcast, knowing that that's really the heartbeat?
We're going to take the next couple of months and actually figure that out. I think what I want to do is I want to survey some of the listeners, we'll probably get a link or something like that set up, to maybe ask them some questions what they want to know more about. Because at the end of the day, I just want the podcast to really reflect, this is a fun project for me, right? This is I'm not doing it to have the most listeners, the most subscribers, the most I'm not trying to be Joe Rogan or any other famous podcaster out there. It's really just an outlet, a creative outlet for me to be able to talk to someone else and hear other people's perspectives, maybe give a little bit of my perspective. And just so other people can kind of hear what's actually happening out there, just to see if that sparks interest. Because I think all it takes is one little thing to click. You don't have to agree with you don't have to like me, you don't have to agree with me, you don't have to have any of the same things happening to you. But if you can find one little commonality somewhere in either my journey or one of our guests' journey, if that can just spark some type of change agent in you to be able to start to go down this journey. And a lot of it's just to become more self-aware, because I think once you become more self-aware, you can at least then start to put the people around you and the processes around you to try to actually change and help hold you accountable. Because it's really hard by yourself. You really almost got to call it out to the universe and have the universe help you. And I think that having a relationship with either a good friend or a spouse or God, I think those, I think having a good foundation, right? And that's why I love God so much. And I love that idea of a big time being able to be the center point, right? Where it's like perfect, right? And everything else kind of just shapes from that. And we're all just kind of like when man came onto earth, like man, took that first, took the apple, right? And they took the first sin, right? But man has a lot of good, but it's not really bad. It's opportunities on figuring out how, like, to me, I think the universe is balanced with good and bad. I just think it's the energy somehow of how to like kind of harness all of that together. I don't know if that makes sense. That was probably. No, I started to like lose myself there for a second because it's a big concept.
It all comes back to how you handle the external and how that creates something within you that either becomes productive or destructive. Mm-hmm. And so some people kind of need to experience both to find the right concoction where it's just exuding good all the time.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing too is I'm trying to help people do it without having to go through as much pain and trauma as I've had to go through. But everybody's going through their own pain and their own trauma. No one, everyone could compare, oh, that's worse than that. It's really not. Everyone's journey is both good and hard and easy, like at the same time. Like it's really hard at the end of the day. Like, it's hard. Even like the rich people, the billionaires, trust me, they have a hard life too. The poor people have a hard life, right? Like the people that grew up in, this area and that area, like life is hard. But I think once you know who you are, like you said, like not being able to pierce that veil, that's when you become unshakable and unstoppable. And because if those external things can shake you and move you, you're never going to be able to like keep moving forward at a rate that's going to be able to give you some type of satisfaction, maybe. Because as soon as like, Johnny says, hey, well, you want to go to the bar tonight? And you like are like having a weak moment. You're like, yeah, man. Like after you set all these goals and you like knew you're going to do all that. And then you're like, oh yeah. And this is what happens. Or you see something on social media that triggers you. Whether it's like, like that's the best part about the media, right? Like the media can be used for good or evil. At the end of the day, it's like just get one more step above it, be aware of what's happening and look at a situation and look at both sides of it. Look all the way around and get full perspective of like, hey, why do you feel about this way about a viewpoint? And why do I feel this way? And like, why, like, it's okay. Like, if you see black and I see white, I think that's kind of cool because then it's more of like, all right, well, why does he see that? Get to know him, right? Like deploy empathy, be curious. Like that's why I love Gary Vee so much. People are like, why do you like that Gary Vee? He cusses, says the F-bomb all the time. And, he's just going fast and he doesn't have any balance in his life. Yeah. Okay. Well, that might all be true. And you may seem that, but like all I hear is be more curious, be kind, be patient, hustle, like all the things that kind of like make like all the ingredients. I feel like he's kind of went through a journey. He's just been able to clearly articulate kind of what works for him. And there's a lot of good traits out there. And I'm super fascinated with leaning into curiosity because I've always done it. I just didn't know that was, it was almost like bad when I was a kid. Like, when the teacher says, you ask too many questions, kid. Well, I don't think people ask enough questions. Probably because they got shut down, yep. Right? Because not many humans have the patience to be able to sit there and answer questions when someone asks either. But that's because they got modeled that from the generation before them, right? And so I think it's just this whole journey, this podcast is really just going to be, hey, what's happening? Like this could shift a million different times, I think, depending on what I'm into and what I'm doing. And I never want to have it too structured or too rigid. I know that's bad for marketing or ideal clients and stuff like that, or trying to like, I know a lot of niches are good, having a niche. But I don't care about anything. I don't care about the stat. I don't care about the metrics. I just want to talk about good conversations. And it's more to me, it's just as much about the listener, but it's a lot about the guest. Like I really want to understand like what that guest, if the guest can unlock a couple nuggets along the way, or if I can shed a couple insights on that, because we're all on our different journeys, right? There's things that you're probably learning right now that you could share with me. And I'll be like, oh, wow, that's cool. And that's just going to help my learning. And that's how, it's kind of like this whole AI thing. When the machines start to learn, they learn at a rapid rate because they're not fighting each other. They're actually getting along with each other. If we could do that as humans, we would all learn faster and we would grow faster and this world would be a better place.
That's well said. It's a mutually collective podcast. It's therapeutic for the host, for the guest, for the listener.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe to conclude here, maybe do one final sign off here for we'll call it season 1.
It's a long season. Yeah.
It's a very long season, but that's the trajectory it needed to take to find itself. Right?
I got my training wheels off, I hope.
It found itself just like you had to find yourself. So
yeah. And I hope everybody knows that I really do, like, Big Fish Cares isn't just a buzzword. Like, I hope by, like, hearing my story, like, you guys realize that, like, you know, I care about you. I care about others. I want the world to be a better place because I felt like the world wasn't a great place to me when I was growing up, or even now. Like, I still feel like there's a lot of bad stuff that keeps happening to me. I look at it as learning opportunities. Now I smile and go through the door. The dark, you know, a lot of people don't want to open the door because they know it's dark on the other side. Me, because I've trained myself over and over again, it's almost like, oh, it's dark? Cool. I'm like a weirdo now. I'm like, open the door. Hey, what's in there? And now I just smile at adversity. But it takes a while to get there. But I want to do it with you. And if you're scared about doing something, if you have fear, I want you to know you can write, you can comment, you can message me. You know, my whole mission in life is to, like, you know, just make the world a better place. And if I can have a positive impact on 1 million people, and those 1 million people can have an impact on another million people, you know, pretty soon that we can, you know, really do some damage in this world. Because I do believe that it can exist. It's just we all have to kind of get on the same page. And I think we're starting. I can definitely feel a shift. Maybe I'm just in my own little world, but I feel like there's a shift in humanity that's coming over these next 20 years of these types of core values that are going to make the world a better place. And I think that with the technology, as much as people are going to hate it, I think the technology is going to help us in a good way. But that's me being Mr. Some people think I'm too optimistic. I like to use the word practical optimism, like my buddy Gary Vee says. You know, be practical but have optimism, because, you know, when you live in a dark world all the time, I mean, what do you think you're going to attract? You're going to attract more darkness. You know, you're going to start doing more dark things, you know, and it's like now instead of me chasing, I feel like the people in the processes and the things are coming to me now, which is, it's still a weird place to be in because I've been trained for 40 years to go, chase it. But now it's like I can just sit here and talk about some of my experiences, and then someone reaches out to me. Mm-hmm. And then they have a conversation, and then that opens up to either a new opportunity, something fun to do on a weekend, go visit a friend, go visit a new city, maybe a doing business opportunity. Maybe there's an opportunity for, you know, us to do something together, collaborate. You know, I don't know. I'm just taking it all kind of and living present. And speaking of this, I got an update for everybody. I'm having another baby. You guys heard it here first. I haven't even posted this on social media yet. So this podcast, this is exclusive content.
Congratulations.
Yeah, Benny and Brittany are having, this will be my third baby. This will be Brittany's second. And little Evie Grace will have a play partner here coming up in January 24. So that's another reason why I'm taking 90 days off to really, I want to be more present, you know, with Brittany as she experiences this pregnancy. You know, those aren't for the faint of heart. I'm so glad I'm a guy. So I'm going to be doing that this summer. I'm doing a little bit of coaching with Contractor Dynamics, where I help contractors, help them, you know, build their brand, create an amazing experience, learn how to go from salesman or roofer to CEO, right? That's a hard change, man, and not let that tie to your identity. And so I'm really passionate about helping other people that are kind of like in the same world as me. I started the media company, Big Fish Media. You know, we follow a couple people around trying to showcase their stories. So there's that opportunity happening. I get to speak at some pretty cool places, different conferences. I got to speak at VCon this year. That was a dream come true. To go from listening to Gary Vee on like YouTube or Facebook in like 2012, 2013, to start to execute some of the things that he talked about, you know, with my own flavor, of course. And then to get in his world with V Friends and the NFT project in 2021. At that same time, you know, I was going through a tough time in my life. My brother, literally a month later, got killed. And that whole community of just awesome, cool, loving people was like I just had a bunch of new friends, and they're all over the world, and it was really cool. And then to be more involved in that, and then Gary to take notice, and then Gary to ask me to speak this year on his stage was like, I mean, that's like, I don't know. I mean, I did manifest that because I was like, when I was at VCon the first time, I remember with Cody, I was like, wow, it'd be really cool to like share my story with this kind of audience, because this is the type of audience that really, you know, could use that type of story. And if it happened faster than I could have ever dreamed.
It just shows that when you put it out there, good things come back, because now you know who you are, right?
Yeah. So I don't know what the podcast is going to bring. I know that we're going to be more intentional with helping promote it a little bit better. You know what it's like with business, like, you know, if you could actually start the operation of it and always forget to like promote it or market it, you know, the right way, because you're just so ingrained in just doing it. So now I think, you know, maybe we'll slow down the frequency. Maybe we'll go to like every other week. Just so we can be more intentional with the guests, plan a little bit better, maybe do a lot more in person. Like I don't want to do the Zooms anymore. It was hard for me because I was still working in Big Fish Contracting and in Pittsburgh. You know, I had so many other guests around the country that I wanted to interview. So now as I travel the country, I'm going to plan ahead a little bit better, do some stuff in podcast studios. So hopefully it's more in person. I really love the in person way better. I think I'm more of a better in person. It just makes me feel better. I don't even know the cameras are around, because when you're at home on the computer, that you're staring at yourself like the whole time. Yeah. It's just like weird.
It's not as impactful for the viewer either.
So that's it. Yeah. I mean, like, you know, stay tuned, follow us, you know, go to bennyfisher.com. You know, follow me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, you know, email me, ben@thebigfishco.com. Get a hold of me. I really want to hear from you. I want to hear what you guys want. If you got value out of the podcast, even if you don't, it really helped for me. Like if you like it, subscribe to it. All the things that you probably hear podcasters say. I'm not the best mechanics person when it comes to podcasting, but love to get this episode out to the rest of the world. We'll probably be posting this episode on bennyfisher.com so people can kind of get to know me at my core. And if you guys have questions for me, man, I want to answer them, and I just want to support you in any way I can, and I appreciate everything. This is a dream come true, to be able to just sit here and talk and just hang out, and like the world's not burning down around me. You know, my family's taken care of, my business is taken care of, all the people at Big Fish are humming and they're drumming. I mean, I have great friends. Like, I don't know, like life is really good, and I'm super appreciative of it, and I'm excited just to keep building and the journey ahead. So thanks for doing this with me, Chris.
You got it, man. I'll see you on episode 180.
All right. You just spoke it into existence.
Thank you for listening to the Big Fish Cares podcast.